Just a disclaimer, the opinions expressed in this podcast are our own views and views of our guests. Nothing in this podcast is to be taken as legal advice.
LexisNexis is a proud sponsor of That's Just Criminal podcast. Remember, AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers using AI will. Make LexisNexis your preferred legal AI research and productivity technology partner. Find out more at lexisnexis.co.nz. The That's Just Criminal podcast is proudly sponsored by the Criminal Bar Association of New Zealand. The CBA was set up in 1984 and provides support and collegiality to criminal practitioners in New Zealand, whether they are defence lawyers, prosecutors, judges, academics or students. For more information, visit www.criminalbar.org.nz. Now let's get on with the episode.
Sometimes it feels like you're in court just to get away from chaos.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Which is ironic.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
It's such a cool, calm, collected place where people...
There's air conditioning, other colleagues, often see your friend.
Yeah, and if somebody just kind of bought me snacks every once in a while, it would be the perfect place for me.
Like a hotel. It would be like room service if they bought you snacks in court. Kia ora tēnā koe and welcome to That's Just Criminal with me, Annabel Cresswell, and my co-host,
Sumudu Thode.
Today's episode is one we've put before the Secret Barrister episode because we've had a number of questions from people who've come up to us and said, listen to your podcast or emailed us or contacted us through LinkedIn saying, can you answer this question? And I think our very first question today that we answered came from a distressed barrister in my own chambers who was like, Annabel, can you do a goddamn podcast on this particular topic? So we've picked out a few of those and we're going to answer those today, aren't we, Sumudu?
We are. So you guys had a lot of questions for the Secret Barrister, which we've sent through, but there were a lot of questions from lawyers and non-lawyers about our life and what we do. So we're going to go through some of those. And if you've got questions, reach out to us through LinkedIn or email, and we'll see if we can answer them in a different episode.
It was interesting how many non-lawyers actually love the podcast and are quite interested in it. So there's quite a few questions from them, which is stuff like your normal questions we won't answer, like, how do you defend someone if you think or know that they're guilty? But there's lots of really good questions from non-lawyers. So we'll ask a few of those, and I think we might try and intersperse them between questions from the people that we also work with who are like, please, can you answer this particular question?
Absolutely.
So, first question that I was asked by a distressed member of my chambers, how do you approach those really hard cases where you have absolutely no defence? Sumudu, why don't you start with your answer to that question?
I understand this question because whenever I read a file, it's like I need to not convince myself, but I need to be really sure of what the defence is. And if I find it really hard to understand it, then I feel like I can't convince a judge or jury. But I think the important thing is it's not what's in your head. It's the evidence that comes out in trial, and it can be so different. You go into a case thinking this is the way the case is going to run, and then by the end of the trial, it's completely different. So I think it's really important just to keep an open mind and just kind of roll with the punches and see what happens in court.
Yeah, and I think the other answer to that is that when you're really hard up for a defence or it's something technical or something so explanation, that's when you go through the case with a fine-tooth comb because you're desperate. And that's when you can find things that are actually really helpful to the defence. But we're talking about cases sometimes where you have fingerprints, DNA, 5 witnesses saw you do it. When you have clients like that, obviously the best thing to do is to say to them, you are going to be found guilty.
I think sometimes I go, hey, ask for a sentence indication. So for those that don't know what a sentence indication is, it's asking the court for an indication of what the end sentence would be, whether that is the type of sentence or the length of sentence sometimes. And some clients think that that's a really great idea.
You can't do that every time, though. And also, for like the courts and the Crown don't really like doing sentence indications when we should be able to give them the guideline, for certain things like drugs cases, the guidelines on what they're likely to get are quite clear. It takes a bit of work for a judge to give you sentencing indications. So that's not the answer every time, but it can definitely be a good answer to ride that line between pleading guilty or not. But if we're talking about cases where the client's absolutely not going to plead guilty and he insists he didn't do it, but there's nothing that really can help you show it, I think it's just, you just focus and find something, or you run the case. Just run the case on his instruction, put the Crown to proof. Some of the best defences are prove it.
Absolutely. You charge them, you prove it.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you'd be surprised how many
Yeah, what
times
you can find, to chip away at. Like you can just
Yeah.
chip away at the prosecution case, and they hate that.
So another question.
And is this a lawyer or non-lawyer one, Sumudu?
It could be both, but I think it's mostly a non-lawyer question.
Yeah.
So the second question is there anyone that you wouldn't defend?
So short answer, no. There's a couple. I mean, we definitely, and it was in episode 2 where we talked about Nicola Gobbo. I definitely am like a defence lawyer that has let down the entire defence bar. I'd find pretty hard, but I think you'd still do it.
I think Rishi gave a really good example of that when we asked him that question in that episode, and he said, how's she different to any other client, anyone that's murdered somebody or whatever heinous crime it is that they're accused of. But I think it's also important to know our obligations as well, our legal obligations under the Lawyers and Conveyancers Act. So there's only certain circumstances where we can refuse instructions.
Yes, exactly. One is if you're at capacity, that you literally can't take it on. A second one is if you don't have the expertise in that field, and that one comes in really handy, because one thing we get, I reckon, once a year, if not twice a year, someone ringing up going, I want to sue the government. I want to sue the police for millions of dollars. Yeah. And if you really hate another barrister, you go, call this person. They might be able to help you. No, don't do that. That's just a joke. But ultimately, yes, we would take anyone. So any of you terrible, terrible criminals out there, bring it, is what we say to you.
Give us a call. I sort of laugh about this, but I only kind of say this to my friends and family. But I just go, look, if you want to sell your house, I can't help you. But like if you kill someone, I'm your girl. Not encouraging people to kill anyone, but I'm like, that's what I've done. That's my expertise, and that's all I can help you with.
Okay, so this is a non-lawyer question. Can you describe a typical day? This would take forever. A typical day as a defense lawyer, but I can give you a typical morning. Wake up. If you get up before the kids, start firing off emails, checking stuff, doing stuff that you should have done last night, got too tired. Get the kids out the door. Where are your socks? Where are your socks? Where's your lunch? Where's your lunch? Get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. Race to school. Get there at 1 minute to 9. Get from the court. Already your phone's going ping, ping, ping. So-and-so client wants to see you. So-and-so wants to know why you haven't answered. You're messaging your office manager going, please set me up an AVL with this client. By the way, I'm running 5 minutes late. Can you tell that client that is waiting for me in the office that I'll be there soon? Get to have an hour with a client, explaining what they need to do, going through a brief, sign them off. That's a typical morning for me. What about you,
if you're in
Sumudu?
trial.
And can you do it that fast? Because I don't think we need to spend hours with this.
No, okay. Wake up before the kids get up so I can get some exercise in. Try and have a shower before somebody else walks in there. I'm talking about my kids. And then get ready. What do you want for breakfast? What do you want for breakfast? Of course, they want 2 different things. Go get dressed, brush your teeth. No, actually brush your teeth. Socks, shoes, get in the car, Where's your water bottle? Where's your lunchbox? Drop them off. And then from the moment I drop them off, I'm on the phone all the way to court or the office because I'm returning phone calls, get to the office, and I'm like, now I need breakfast. Really important. Because it's the first time I've stopped to breathe. And this is 9:30. And from 10 o'clock, it's court. And honestly, sometimes it feels like you're in court just to get away from chaos.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Which is ironic.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
And it's such a cool, calm, collected place where people...
There's air conditioning. There's, other colleagues, often see your friend.
Yeah, and if somebody just kind of bought me snacks every once in a while, it would be the perfect place for me.
Like a hotel. It would be like room service if they bought you snacks in court.
I had a junior, and his claim to fame was that he knew what I would like for food on a daily basis. That every morning tea, he'd bring me what I like. And every afternoon tea, he'd get me what I like. And I'm like, you're the best junior I've had. I mean, you've done no work in this trial, but you've got my eating habits down pat.
Actually, Sumudu, that brings us straight into the next question, which is a good one from a lawyer, so not a non-lawyer.
Wow,
Specifically,
mansplaining.
what makes a good junior?
Getting me snacks.
Yeah, obviously that. Okay, I've got a couple of opinions on this. The number one overriding, I think, that you need in a good junior is someone who believes in the case as much as you do. And when you have a good point, they really want to push that good point and they'll be like, yeah, that was good. We should have won that. Or, it's really disappointing that the judge didn't agree with us. And then it's disappointed when you're disappointed. And it shouldn't matter. But when you have a junior that's like, well, I knew we weren't going to win that. Well, maybe he's guilty anyway. And they're not
You're like,
on
thanks,
your butt.
negative Nancy. I don't need you here.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that can be really disappointing, but you only notice that after a while that you're like, it's so much easier when the junior is just 100% believes in the client or believes in the case the way that you do.
I think for me, it's like the preparation. I want to make sure that the junior knows, what needs to be done. So even little things like having the commentary printed and put on the file, the question trail printed and put on the file. It's just those little things that makes our life so much easier when we're in court.
Yes.
Or, some point comes up in court and they're already on their laptop researching the point, trying to get you something, or finding, that reference in the notes of evidence. So it's kind of thinking about what we need without having to ask constantly.
Yes. As senior trial counsel as well, there's two things. You can have a junior helping you in the trial who's someone who's much less experienced than you and there to learn, and they'll be researching stuff overnight and trying to take the load off you. Sometimes we'll just get co-counsel, which is someone more similar to our level of expertise, and that's just to help share the load in the trial. And we'll often do that in more serious trials and ones where you kind of need a break while the other lawyer does some stuff so you can be preparing for the next witness or whatever it is you need to.
That's really helpful, especially if you've got multiple complainants or something. You can go, look, I'll do complainant 1, you do 2, and then I'll do the next one. And so it does mean that you get a bit of a break.
Yes, but the other thing that's really handy is when you have someone, whether they're co-counsel or a junior, if they are just helping you get through the goddamn trial. Sometimes some of these trials can be an absolute, you feel like you're crawling to the end of it. It's such hard work and everything else is turning to custard in the background of your practice. The junior in my last trial, I had a bad back and every day she came with Panadol because she knew I would have not managed to get to a pharmacy. And then I also pick my lips when I'm getting stressed. And so then she started bringing in moisturizer for my lips. And I was like, is there any of my needs that you have not anticipated? Perfect junior.
Well, I think perfect juniors also think about what you can do outside of court, like exercise, go for a run, climb a hill.
Yeah, so Modu's referring to the trial that we did recently where she forced me to run a half marathon before court every morning and then hike up a hill after.
By half marathon, she means 5 kilometres.
Yeah, but it's hard to say who was the junior in that trial or who wasn't, but I know who was the tired person that was getting too much exercise, if that's a thing. Okay, next question. How do you approach a jury closing and what is your go-to structure? Again, this could be an hour-long seminar, so I'll just say a couple of tips and tricks that I would use. Throughout the trial, you think of things that you want to close to the jury, and the closing is your focus when you're defence counsel particularly. You are trying to chip away or establish your defence case so that at the end you pull it all together in the closing. But sometimes other things occur to you and you're like, I must remember to say that. So I keep a little page at the back of my trial booklet with notes for closing. And so by the end, there's something like that will help. But often they fall away as well. They seem really, really crucial at the start of the trial. And by the end, it's a stupid point. What do you do?
Yeah, I kind of do the same. Or if I can think of a story to bring it all together or a quote or, something like that, I just note it down. And then throughout my trial notes as well, if there's sort of a really good exchange or a comment that a witness made or something like that or a point, I just highlight it so that at the end of it I can just go and look at my highlights.
Don't you also wear adorable little shoes so the jury like your shoes?
So they pretty. focus on my shoes and not what I'm saying? I hope not, but I do like pretty shoes.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed you do, but
yeah, the closings, everyone's got a different, approach to it. There's not sort of a right or wrong one. for the jury. Just try and engage, especially with those ones that are not looking at you, that are looking away. You're like, hey, this is my chance to convince you. Make
Look at me.
goddamn eye contact.
Look at me. Look at my pretty
Yeah,
shoes.
look at me in my pretty shoes. Damn it. This is my moment to shine.
Yeah, and I can do a really quick go-to structure, but I try and find something snazzy in opening of your closing, then go into the burden and standard of proof and how this is all on the Crown and that they've brought the case and they have to prove it, and then go into credibility and reliability of witnesses and why you can't believe anything that Crown witnesses have said. And then I do, when I've gone through that, I go, and here's some points to remember, and throw some of the defence high points. And then I sit down, because I think it is important to also be quick. I think they stop listening intently after 7 minutes and stop listening at all really after 25. So keep it snazzy and quick.
Yeah, I agree. I think 20 minutes is roughly what I aim for. I mean, obviously, it depends on the case. If you're, closing on a murder trial, you're not going to try and do that in 5 minutes. You could, but you probably shouldn't. So I think it's just important to read the room.
Yes. And I think if it's been like an 8-week or 12-week trial and there's loads and loads of evidence, you can't really, particularly for the Crown, you can't really do a quick closing with that, because you do have to kind of go through. But I still think even in those circumstances, keep it as short as you can. And I think structure is really important. So I'm glad that I think it's important to let the jury know of your structure and have one.
Yeah, so if you say, I'm going to talk to you about 4 points, make sure you talk about 4 points and, signpost them so they know, but also so they know you're coming towards the end of it. Also try and, keep it personable. Like, I know it's serious. I know that, the client's stressing out and all of that, but just try and keep it as conversational as possible.
Yeah, I do that in cross-examining complainants as well, particularly when it's going to be horrific stuff and you're saying, you're not telling the truth. I often tell them at the start of that this isn't going to be long. It's a bit like a dentist saying, this won't hurt a bit. And then it's really, really hurt. But at least it's quick. Okay, next question that we had asked was a non-lawyer question. How do you balance your work and life? Can we not answer, no, how do you juggle your work life and your personal life? Is that the question? Can we not answer that because it's a question that only gets asked to women? We'll answer that when we normalise asking that question to men, because the answer is, I guess, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But also, how do men do it?
Maybe we should ask our male guests that question to begin with and see how they squirm.
Yeah, let's do that on the next time we have a male guest on the podcast. But incidentally, we need to have a female guest next time, because a couple of the comments I've had from people is, why are you only asking male guests, and also good-looking male guests? Who else?
We've only had 3 episodes.
It's like, calm down, everyone. Okay, how do you walk the line between duties to the court and following your client's instructions? Oh, that's so...
It's a really hard one, because each client thinks that they're your most important client and your only focus, but then you have a duty not to mislead the court. So that's the starting point.
That's the overriding duty. So, but it's just the balance is hard with that. We
can't put forward anything that, say, if the client said, look, I did it, but I want you to tell the court I didn't. We have ethical obligations that stop us from doing that. That sort of situation, it is really hard, because you kind of want to tell the client what you think, but it's their case ultimately.
But one thing I would say to lawyers that are learning and up and coming, the little red book, which is our book of ethics, it's the Lawyers and Conveyancers Code of Conduct Rules, 2008.
Lawyers and Conveyancers Act, Lawyers Conduct and Client Care Rules of 2008.
Yes, very helpful book if you don't already, and many and most lawyers will have that, but if you're starting out, that little booklet helps you so much with your ethics, and you'll know it off by heart soon, but you do sort of forget exactly how it is, so it's a good thing to go back to it.
We can put a link to that in our show notes.
Oh my God, link in the show notes. It's like we're real podcasters.
We are.
Yeah.
So another non-lawyer question we've got is, how do you respond to negative feedback or comments about your role? So, those comments like, how do you sleep at night? How do you defend the guilty?
Oh, yeah.
So it's those comments and negative feedback that we always get as defence lawyers. So how you deal with that.
What's your answer to that, Sumudu?
Ignorance is bliss a lot of the time. I don't read online comments and things like that because I just don't want to know. I don't want to listen to it.
What if someone asks you to, like, or says to you, how do you live with yourself? That sort of thing. What do you say?
I have a stock standard answer. So I just say, look, I'm not the judge or jury. I'm just the lawyer. I just put my client's best foot forward. It's not up to me to decide whether I think they're guilty or not guilty. Really doesn't matter. So I kind of just brush it off like, hey, just, it's not my job. I just kind of just do my job and everything else that the world revolves sort of thing. I don't really get involved in justifying myself because I don't feel like I have to.
Same. And like people that are asking that are usually kind of, if they're asking in an aggressive way as well, they're often like, then you're not going to be someone that we're going to ever be mates and I don't need to impress you. So I would normally step away. When people go, how do you sleep at night? I'm like, I help people at the lowest point of their life, support them through it. I help the destitute, the mentally ill, all those people that have no one else fighting for them. I'm their guy and I do it so passionately with so much. That's how I sleep at night. What do you do for society? How's your Chardonnay? Here's Chablis that you're sipping while you're asking me that question.
We get this type of question from non-lawyers, to be fair, because lawyers know what we do.
Yeah.
But it's just the non-lawyers kind of have this view of what we do based on probably some movie they've watched or TV or something. For me, I'm like, it goes to show more about you than it does about me. When I started having stuff in the media, do you get random people just looking you up and emailing you their 2 cents worth about cases that you've done?
Yeah.
I found that really hard initially because I was like, people are looking up your email address and just want to tell you what a piece of shit they think you are because you're a defense lawyer. Those emails, I now have a stock standard response. Thank you for taking the time to write to me. I hope you have a good day. It's like, I've acknowledged it, but I'm not going to get involved in justifying your views either.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if we're talking about questions from the public, and God knows what it's like for people to actually in the public eye a lot, because ours is all very, very fleeting. But I sort of feel like I've made it in the world when you start getting like death and sexual violence threats. Yeah, especially sexual violence, because you only get that when you're a very successful female. So I'm always like, oh, I've made it. People do that.
Somebody wants to come and kill me tonight.
Yeah. And then it's also just, it's funny. It's not funny. Obviously, it's horrifying, but we don't get it a lot. But I do think as well, like some of the stuff that people come up with because they've got nothing else to do and they've worked themselves up into a little frenzy. Me and another female colleague were representing a murderer. He was just mentally ill, but had done quite a bad murder. And we got this letter from someone saying, you two are so despicable for defending this guy. I want to hold you down, pull out your toenails. And it went on like all this like really gruesome stuff that they wanted to do to us. And we were like, that is literally worse than the murder that this guy did. Like, you're actually worse than him, but all good.
I think we just have to deal with it with some humour because you can't take these things to heart.
I mean, you do have to approach all of our job with some humour, but just in case anybody's getting offended, that is not to say that we actually think a lot of it is funny, but I have a girl group of barristers that I send questions to, and I said, hey, does anyone have any good questions that you want to ask about barrister life and you want us to discuss? And one of the questions was, why do I feel dead inside? So
because you had no soul.
I love that because it's like we also joke about how horrifying our job is and how we have to trudge through day to day.
I think it's just really funny when you know, like defense lawyers, prosecutors, cops, judges, whenever we get together, it's like all of us have the same dark humor.
Yes.
Because you would make jokes about things like this, which the public rightfully will find horrifying that we're, thinking it's funny that people are threatening us. But rightly or wrongly, it's a coping mechanism because you just can't take everything to heart. Because if we did, honestly, we'd be crazy.
One of the other questions that I think was asked, and I don't think I wrote it down, but this is one that gets asked, is like, because New Zealand's so small, are you battling with the same people all the time? Because we're against the prosecutors and against police all the time. and obviously it's vice versa, do you end up hating each other and like when you see each other, you want to like throat punch them, as you'd say? And the answer is kind of yes and no. Like you do have certain people that you're kind of always getting into barmies with, so you kind of steer clear. But there's also most of the time you know that each other are just doing your job. And although like I don't have a lot in common with police officers, don't spend a lot of time with them, they cope with their jobs the way we cope with our jobs. So I was at a party on Saturday night with a lot of police officers. Great time, great crack, because they are, same as us, really dark humour and doing a difficult job.
I think in smaller towns, this is probably more of an issue because you've only got a couple of prosecutors and a couple of defence lawyers.
You have to make more of an effort to get on with them in smaller towns because you see them all the time. And bigger cities, you can be.
It makes it hard if you just have no, shall we say, common ground on submissions. And I mean, I can speak to this because of where I practice. And I've kind of got to the point where I don't try and argue with them or try and agree with them. I just go, okay, that's your view. This is mine. Let's put it in front of the court. The judge will decide. End of story. Because I found sometimes trying to argue with these prosecutors, trying to get them to see your view, it's just like banging your head against a brick wall.
Yes. Okay, non-lawyer question. Does restorative justice actually work? For those who don't know what restorative justice is, it's meetings between the parties where they try and move forward towards a resolution, often before sentencing. And then it's something that can be taken into account at sentencing for an offender. I would say yes, it does, but only if both parties are keen for it. And most of the time, one or the other is not. And it's usually the victim, isn't it, that's not really keen. But it's good that it's there. And when it works, it really works. It can be absolutely life-changing for people, for both the defendant and for the victim. So I would say yes. What would you say,
I think
Sumudu?
there's just so many hoops, though, in terms of, trying to get in contact with people and having the right phone numbers. If the clients are in custody, it makes it a bit harder. So, there's all of those issues. But then when it does work and when there is a report, you can just see, when you read some of those reports, you can just see how people's feelings come out and how their views change and things like that as well. Because you go into some of these restorative justice conferences just hating, the defendant. And then you can sort of see that when they hear what's happened or a bit more info, it just sort of softens their stance a bit. I think you're right. When it works, it works. But
But you're right
that it's rare.
Yeah, what it mainly is for those who don't have experience with actually putting restorative justice in practice, it is mainly a lot of chasing up phone numbers and trying to get hold of people and noting that you've tried to get hold of them and then getting up to the judge and go, well, everyone tried to get hold of each other, but they couldn't get hold of each other.
Kind of related to that is another non-lawyer question about whether cultural reports, as they're commonly known, or Section 27 reports, whether they work. What's your experience with that, Annabel?
Oh, so cultural reports. Yeah, this is something that the general public are really anti, I find. It's a vibe that I get. But cultural reports are so incredibly important that for judges to understand the background. Yes.
So it's really important for us to know as well.
It's not all New Zealanders. I've acted for like a Cambodian refugee who the history and the trauma that they'd been through, everybody doesn't just know about the history of Cambodia, but a cultural report will like be able to set that out really precisely and educate. And of course you have to take into account what someone's trauma has been in their background, and especially if it's really clearly linked to their offending. Was the question, do they help?
Yeah, the question was, do they help? I know cultural reports, it's about their background and upbringing and family, and there's just so much other information that goes into it. It's not just about culture, which I think is what the general public think because of the way that the media have portrayed it.
Yes. That brings us into, there's quite a few media questions I don't think we really want to get into, but someone asked, can the media be helpful to the defence? Which is because we sort of generally try and avoid the media. I don't think we want them there. I wish they would stick the cameras out of the courtroom. But can they be helpful to the defence? It's not like in America and Hollywood where they go, not in Hollywood, but in the news, they go public on before the jury's out. Like we have rules about that in New Zealand. We don't use in any way you shouldn't really talk to the media at all unless your client really wants you to. And there are also ethical rules about that. So I can't think of a time where I would think the media would be helpful. But can you?
Not from a defense perspective. I mean, I think you don't get me wrong, I've got some really good friends that work in the media, but I tend to steer clear of them, especially during trials.
And look, we also, as part of the matrix of the people that we hang out with and see all the time, there's court reporters, and we end up really liking them and seeing they do a really good job too. So I don't want to badmouth the media, but we hate you. And I do think trials have become too highly popularized now at this point, but we won't give any examples at all of that.
No.
For the next podcast, we are going to do a tell us your most hilarious or terrible day in court and ask for barristers from up and down the country to tell us a terrible story. Sumudu and I are going to judge it, and it's a prize for the most terrible car crash dumpster fire. When I was first prosecuting, was in the middle of closing, and the edge of my gown got caught on the lectern that I was relying on. I pulled my gown as I moved. The lectern slipped, fell on the floor, broke into lots of pieces, and then my pages fell all over the floor. That was not cool. Yeah, so do you have one like that?
I've had, the same sort of stuff with closings. I'd left my closing in another courtroom and I had to just wing it. That was last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the worst days in court were literally yesterday. So
yeah. There was that time. There was a time I broke the heel.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had to go buy some insurance. In the middle of the day, that was pretty bad.
That is it for us for tonight. Thank you to the Criminal Bar Association and LexisNexis. Thank you for listening, and that's just criminal.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast.